So Sean, tell us a little bit about your role within the LGBT community.
I suppose the main role I've had since moving to Birmingham about 10 years ago was being chair of the Midlands LGBT Employee Network, which I did for about 4 years till 2015. And that is a group of volunteers who put together about 3 events a year looking at issues around the workplace. And that was quite successful. I think we built it up a little bit more in those last few years. And the other main thing I'm involved with is at the University of Birmingham, setting up and running their mentoring scheme for students, where we pair LGBTQ students with employers from a different range of organisations. It was the first of its kind, and apparently it still is. So those are my 2 main areas.
How did you get into this role?
Without going back too far, I was president of my students' union many, many years ago, and I was the first out gay man. This was in the 70s. And then I went into teaching, and I went back into the closet, because at that time you could be fired for just being gay. And particularly in teaching, you can imagine the sort of concerns that people would have, wrongly. So when I left teaching, went to work in University Career Services, I thought, for my own benefit, I'm going to be out at work, which I did within like 10 minutes. And I suppose the next key moment was when a student brought their CV in for checking, which is a fairly normal thing to do in career services. And they had they asked me whether they should put the fact that they were president of their union, Student Union Gay Society, on their CV or not. And that discussion led to that guy asking me to run a workshop for gay students on choosing gay-friendly employment, employers, what not to put on a CV, guidance for interviews, and so on. And that was probably about 20 years ago now. And that led me to have an interest in thinking how I might support students, particularly in the wider community. It also led to doing a bit of work with Stonewall quite a few years ago. Yeah.
What kind of issues have you encountered from people within the workplaces?
Well, it's interesting because the law has changed. You know, there's protection for the LGBT community in law. You can't be fired just for being gay anymore, fortunately. But there is still, I think, an assumption that there's an issue, and sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. And I think also for people in the workplace, and straight people in the workplace, there's an issue around just being surprised and not knowing how to handle it. So sometimes they don't ask questions, or where they might ask questions which could be quite useful for new employees. And I think also the one of the key issues that I've seen change is the establishment of staff networks for LGBT staff, which has been going on in the States for a long time, but you see it much more these days. And one of the big issues, I think, and this is where Stonewall has been quite clever, is that there's a business case to support people coming out at work, because it's a coming out process which is a key issue for me. And that the research shows that if people are out at work, they're happier, they're more productive, therefore your profits go up, to put it really crudely. And we all behave better at work if we feel relaxed and feel we don't have to watch everything we say in case people find out.
What would you advise for people in the workplace who are LGBT?
I would, before they apply for jobs, I think it's worth doing the homework, because what they will find once they do some research on their website, or the Stonewall provide an employment guide, a workplace guide, is how much, not just support, but how keen organisations are to recruit LGBT people. Because if you think about it, their clients and customers are also LGBT. And if I've got money to spend, where am I going to spend it? If I've got a contract to give, where am I going to put that contract? I'm not going to put it with an organisation where I look at their website or look at their promotional material and there's no mention of diversity or LGBT-ness. So I think that's one thing. Look at staff networks, get involved in those, and the fact that they exist, I think, is quite important.
Do different sexualities have different issues?
That's a really interesting question. I feel I know a bit about what it's like to be a gay man, and I'm not every gay man. I don't pretend to represent the whole gay community particularly, or understand the issues of the whole gay community. And I say that particularly working with younger gay people, that it's a different world for them than it was for me, and than it is for me now. So having said that, I think the answer is yes. I think it's I think it's different for gay women, for lesbians. Again, the focus on the workplace. I'm not saying it's easier or more difficult. I think it's just different. I think for transgender people, and that's not primarily about sexual orientation. There's a huge argument whether T should be part of LGB, which I won't rehearse now. But somebody who's not transgender but knows people who are, I just think they have so much more to deal with. I think the media, films like The Danish Girl and so on, have really helped people understand what the issues are. And I think there are as many LGB people who have no idea about transgender issues as there are straight people.
What has been your biggest achievement in the LGBT community?
I think probably being out and being president of my student union in the 70s, where the age of consent was still 21. So technically, if I was going to have a relationship as a student, I could go to prison for that. Rarely happened at that age in the student community. But up to date, I think it's chairing the Midlands LGBT Employee Network and moving it on a bit, upping the number of people who come to the events and the sponsors we get, because we have no money apart from a bit of sponsorship. And primarily, I think setting up and maintaining and developing and expanding the mentoring scheme